Hello, good morning, and welcome into First Take. You are halfway through the week. It is Hump Day. Skip Bayless and Molly Karam here with you in Bristol. Stephen A. joins us from San Francisco. Gentlemen, what's the good word?
What's going on? How y'all doing?
The Golden Gate behind you. I like that.
San Francisco? What?
Worldwide, Stephen A.
Well, my services were requested, Skip. I'm out here hosting an event tonight in Walnut Creek with the great Joe Montana.
Well, say hello for me, if you would, to the greatest quarterback who ever played.
I will make sure I do that. Yes, sir.
Big time over here.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. We've got a lot to get into today, some really hot topics. Coming up, why does Floyd Mayweather always have to defend his greatness? We'll share his latest comments and if they're necessary. Plus, by now, most of you have seen the high school football players who targeted a ref. But now we have new information, and there's a whole other angle of this. We want to get you guys up to speed and to react. But first, we kick things off with Brandon Marshall, who on Showtime's Inside the NFL last night, and the topic of conversation was Deflategate in the battle between Tom Brady and the NFL. Here's what Marshall had to say. I think that there's three different types of players' view in this thing. Number one is the fighter. I think there's guys that's in the fight with Tom. The second is cowards. I call them cowards. That's the guys that are afraid to face Tom Brady. They want him suspended. I don't believe in that. And the last type is the race card. There are a lot of players out there that believe that white players, specifically at the quarterback position, are treated differently. It's not just African-American players. I've had this conversation with Caucasian players as well. The most important part of this whole discussion is for the process for the players. They just want the process to be fair and right. They just want to get it right. Marshall never holds back, Stephen A. What's your reaction to those comments?
My reaction to it is that I think it's unfortunate. And the reason I think it's unfortunate has nothing to do with the veracity of his comments. He certainly makes sense, and he's absolutely right when he talks about the fact that there are a plethora of African Americans within the sport of football and those connected to players playing in the National Football League who happen to be black that absolutely positively feel that way. But that's just a microcosm of society. I mean, who you tell me you go on the streets anywhere in the United States of America and you locate a black man that does not believe that the rules are applicable in a different fashion to him compared to that of a white male. I'm trying to tell you, you'll be hard-pressed to find one. That's just not reality. Everyone recognizes in the United States of America, particularly when it comes to white male, that there's a different standard upon which they're held. So when you look at it from the perspective of what what Brandon Marshall is saying from a macro perspective, he's absolutely right. But Skip Bayless, the reason why I would label it unfortunate is because at the end of the day, if you're working there for Showtime, if you are a football player within the National Football League and you happen to be black and you use the Tom Brady analogy to bring up racial disparity, it simply doesn't hold water. And these are the kind of things that hurt us in terms of addressing the issue of inequitable treatment because it simply makes no sense and it doesn't hold water. When you look at Tom Brady, you're talking about an individual that is being pursued by Roger Goodell in terms of a suspension because of deflated footballs. Well, guess what? When you think about the black males that have gotten in trouble with Roger Goodell, domestic violence, assault, weed all the time, smoking weed, getting suspended for those transgressions, what have you. Deflated footballs are simply not comparable to that. Now, I do understand that Brandon Marshall didn't mean to bring attention to Deflategate and compare it to what he was alluding to in terms of bringing those comparisons into the equation. But the fact of the matter is, if you're somebody not just outside of the black community, but inside the black community, when you hear his statements, ultimately you're going to compare Tom Brady and the issue of deflated footballs to some of the transgressions some of these black players have found themselves in. And there is simply no comparison. Deflated footballs or not, Tom Brady has been a model citizen. He has been an ambassador for the National Football League. His integrity, the way that he lives his life in terms of his quality of life, how he conducts himself as a law-abiding citizen, he doesn't even belong in the same sentence as the Ray Rices of the world, the Greg Hardys of the world, and others. He simply has no place being drawn, having his name thrown in there. and by Brandon Marshall making the statement that he made. Although from a societal perspective, there isn't a black person worth their salt that can even remotely deny the veracity of his comments, this was a bad example to use it from. We're talking about Tom Brady here and the issue of deflated footballs. When you talk about the fact that, you know what, whether or not somebody black would have gotten away from this and all of that other stuff, it makes absolutely no sense in this argument whatsoever, because the black folks that have gotten in trouble in the National Football League, it hasn't been for deflated footballs. It's been for, some would say, violent crimes. That is the difference. And I think that his comparison was misguided in this particular situation.
As you know, I always defer to you when it comes to this matter on this show. I had no idea which way you were going to go, so I tried to open my mind and listen to every word you just spoke. I hear where you're coming from. Now, again, I'm going to look at it a little differently here, and I'm with you on your societal perspective. I get that. Now, I'll speak as a white guy here. Obviously, in the biggest picture, are there racial undertones to lots of interactions that take place every day in this country between white people and white people and white people and black people? Yes, there are still racial undertones. We know that. Okay. I accept that. I try to fight that, but I accept it. Now, back to this. This was a strong statement that our guy Brandon Marshall made, and I'm a big fan of his personally. We've talked and talked about him. I like him very much personally. I appreciate the struggle he's had and how far he's come within his own personal struggle. But this was a bombshell that he dropped. And when you drop that bombshell, you need to be able to back it up and defend it. So I look at Roger Goodell's recent track record in court that he has taken a beating for of late. What is it, the last 6 times he's lost in court? We've talked about it to death here on this show. So some of those cases have involved Ray Rice and Adrian Peterson and Greg Hardy, and Jonathan Vilma was sort of the lead figure in the Bountygate case that got overturned by Tagliabue. Well, none of those guys were white, obviously, and they got in the end, they all got a fair shake. So, so I'm just going to throw out just an example here. I'm going to go to another star quarterback, a guy who probably should have won the last 2 Super Bowls, named Russell Wilson. If Russell Wilson had been thrust into exactly the same situation Tom Brady just got out of, so far so good, Russell Wilson obviously is an upstanding citizen. He's got a clean track record within the NFL and legally. I got to tell you, Stephen A., I think he would have gotten the same fair shake from Judge Berman that Tom Brady got. I could be wrong about that, but I hope I'm not. And then I think